So hello all of you fantastic folk, and welcome back to another episode of 100 Days of Code with Lilly Code. Today is day 95. So happy. Before I continue, thank you so much everybody who's been following my journey. I really appreciate it, and if you haven't, please do like and subscribe. I feel like a menace asking people to do things, but I really appreciate it, so thanks so much. And with that, let's get started. So what we just did in our previous video was we were uploading our users through, so we fetched our users from the GitHub API, and now we're integrating it into a use context instead. We're sending it through the context so we can access this anywhere in our application. So we've already done that, and we're just tidying things up, and that's what we're doing. So let's get going. So what we're going to do instead of using useState here is we're going to use useReducer. So we just use state to show how that could work, but useReducer is a better implementation, so we're going to use that now. Oh, and I also noticed that I spelled this incorrectly. I have it named GitHub Codex, which this ain't what we want. We need context. Cool. So we should get some errors from the imports. So user results, codex, should be context, and that is that it? Use state is not defined. Yeah, that's okay. We're fixing that now. So cool. We're just going to change our stateful use state to useReducer instead. So we'll see that now. Cool, so I'm just watching the video as always. Yeah, so the first thing we need to do is import our GitHub Reducer, which is here, which we still haven't finished. So yes, we're going to finish our GitHub Reducer, and then we're going to use it in our GitHub context. Okay, so the only thing we need to do for the moment to tie this off is export it so we can import it. So we will export our GitHub Reducer. Yep. And default, export default GitHub Reducer, and now we can import it, and we will update this as we need when we're doing that. So now we have our GitHub context here, and what we want to do is create this useReducer within our component declaration. So we'll say const useReducer. We'll just initialize it as an array here, and then say useReducer. And what we want to pass in is our GitHub Reducer and an initial state. So we'll set in, so we're just getting errors there because we're going to transform from our use state. So that's okay for the moment. So I'll just make this bigger actually. Why not? So y'all can see what's going on in the town all around. Cool. So useReducer, and then in here we're going to have GitHub context, comma, GitHub Reducer, sorry. So GitHub Reducer, and then our action, so that would be our initial state. In our initial state. Cool. So state and dispatch. So yeah, what we have here is our state and our dispatch. So dispatch will be the function that's dispatched. So yeah, this will dispatch the action that we want to run in our reducer here. So cool, we'll see it all being linked up now in a moment, and it'll make a bit more sense then. So where we're going to want to dispatch this is down here for our set users and set loading, because we're not using use state anymore. So instead what we'll do is dispatch, and we will pass this a type, and that would be get users. So you'll see how all this links up now in a moment. It'll start making sense. So now we have this get users. This is one of the action types that we can call when we want to dispatch our reducer. So here where we have action.type, underneath here we can give it the case of get users, and this should be in quotes. And then what we want to do is return some sort of a state here. So we'll just say return, and we want to return the state. So currently what we're returning right now is we're just returning the current state. That's all that we've told it to do, but we want to get the users. So if we go back to our initial state here in our users, in our context, we have our users and our loading. So we're going to want to integrate both of those things when we've called this dispatch. So down here, we want to send the type of get users and then also send over the data. So the payload, which is the data that we're going to send, is going to be data. So now what we're doing is we're dispatching the type of get users and we're sending the payload of data. So cool. So now we can return whatever's in the state and also update the users. So we want to update the users to the action.payload. So cool. And we'll also set loading to false, because this means the loading is finished. So now in our context, we just have to actually use this. So now in here, we want to return the users, and this is going to be the state users, because now we have hooked this up to our state. And the same with loading. So the loading will also come from the state. So this will be state.loading. Line 11, GitHub context. Yes, yes. Cool. And then line 27, 34. Okay, let me just get rid of the comments because we know we don't need them right now. So in here we need to create our initial state. So this will be const initial state, and this will be equal to users, which initially is just an empty array. We're also going to have loading, which will be true when we first start off because it is loading. And then we also need our useReducer, so we'll say const useReducer. So I already typed this out, but I think useReducer and GitHub reducer, yeah, and initial state. No, I didn't, sorry, yeah, I hooked it up somewhere else. So cool. And we'll get the state and then dispatch. So let's just check. We have our action type GitHub reducer. So now, we've called our dispatch. when we fetch the users, and that means we want to get the users. Okay, super. So because of the change of file name to the context, I had to start and stop my development server. So just in my terminal here, I came down, I just paused it because I was like, what is going on? And don't want to be like scratching my head for too long, you know. So I'll just terminate that job. So basically I just stopped it and started it again, and then the naming that I changed the file name like all hooked up and it was okay. So perfecto selecto. So now we're just going to clean up our fetch users function. So let's get going. Just to make sure it's not as messy. So back in our file tree, if we go to our user results, here we go. So here we have a fetch users being called, but now we're doing it through the context here. So now, yes, our loader will keep on loading because loading is set to true, and we just need to take care of that. So in our GitHub context, we'll set loading to false here initially and save. But when we fetch our users then here, we want to set our loading to true so that it knows that we are indeed loading something. And then in the reducer, it gets set back to false. So that's how we know we've got the users. So cool. Okay, yeah. So in our user results here, we'll add another case. So we'll say case set loading, and in this case we want to return our state, and then loading is true. So that means we can hook into this now and set our loading through our reducer. So now in our context, we want to dispatch that and set loading. So I'll create a function just to do this because we're going to want to do it in a few different places. So down here, I will create a function to set loading to just set loading. And then we'll say const set loading. So all we want to do when we do this is dispatch that function that we've created. So rather than doing it like this, rather than doing it like this, we do an arrow and we say dispatch and pass it what we want to dispatch. So we want to dispatch it the type of set loading. Cool. And now that will dispatch that reducer which sets the loading for us. So now we can call that in our fetch user. So we'll just set loading. So now if we call fetch users, we should have the same result. So back in our user results, we'll fetch the users. and we should have the same result that we had before. So there we go, perfect. So it was loading, and then it gets set back to false, and we get our users. Great. My chair's so squeaky. Sorry guys. So now what we can do is we can get rid of the entire use effect. So we can get rid of this use effect because it's being handed in the dispatch, and we can get rid of this as well and save. And we can get rid of it from our imports as well. So now we don't see any users for the moment, but we're going to fix this. And the only reason is because we haven't updated the users into our state, but we're going to fix that now. So what we want to do now, so now we have this fetch users, but what we want to actually do is hook it up to our search functionality so that when we search for a user, it gives us back a specific user as opposed to just showing a load of users. So now we're going to work on our search. Cool. And then we'll see it all come back together again. So I'll just go back into my components here and create a new file called user.search.jsx, and we will create this with rfce, enter, great, and in here I'll just say search, and then we want to bring this into our home page. Da-na-na. Okay, phew. Sometimes it dies quite quickly, my laptop, but it was plugged in, the cable just came loose. So then we have our home component. It's a page, and a component, but we have it under the pages. So in here now we want to import this, so we will import our user search, perfecto, and use it. So this is where our search component is going to go. So all we need to do is just put it in here for the time being. So I'll say user search, just to check that that's displaying on the page, and we're all gravy, baby. You know what I'm saying. So here's search, we see search down there. So we are getting it back, so that's perfect. And now we can start building it out. So first of all, we'll go back to our user search. So we're just going to start working on this component here. So I'll add my parentheses. I want to add multi-line return here. So cool. And then we'll start filling this out. So we'll start with a div with the class name of grid. And we're going to add in a few more. So grid calls 1 for small screens. Do XL grid calls 2, and do large grid calls 2, and on medium. medium. And then we'll also just add some margin, so MB 8 and gap of 8, which again is just a gap, some padding, some margin. So then we'll add in our keyword here, search. Perfect, just so we can see that. And now we want another div. So we'll add the div that has the form and the div that has the button. So this one's going to have a button with btn dash ghost and btn dash large, and this is just going to say clear, and this is where our form is going to go in this div. So in here we'll add a form, and we'll have a class name of form control, and then we want another div with the class of relative to position it relatively, relative, and then within here relative, and then within here we want another div, or no, an input now, and we'll give this some class names as well. So w dash full, width full, padding right 40, bg dash gray dash 200, input and input LG,